Okay guys, alright. Now yesterday we saw about the parameterization as well as page validation we saw, right? So for parameterization, so we have to use CSV dataset config file, which is available in the config elements. And also we saw about the random CSV dataset config file also, where we can pick the data randomly, the input data. And for page validation, so we used to use the assertions. In the assertion, we used to use the response assertion. Okay, there are various assertions are there, size assertion, duration assertion, but most of the times, so we used to use the response assertion, right? And the next one is, so right click on thread group, we'll see the pending ones, the samplers. So in JMeter, samplers we used to call as protocols. Okay, samplers we used to call as protocols. Now if you see that whatever request we have, so this request called HTTP request. If you see the name HTTP request, that's called as web protocol. Mana load runner perspective lo maatladukunte, so that's called as web protocol request. Okay, if you see each and every request, it shows as HTTP request. Right? HTTP request unda prati okka daniki. So by default, it automatically picks the HTTP request for web-based applications. And if you see, there are various samplers are there. So those are nothing but the protocols, JMeter supporting protocols. If you see JDBC request, so JDBC request is nothing but to test the JDBC queries. Okay, and FTP, that is one of the protocol, and Java request, LDAP, OS, SMTP, and TCP/IP protocols. These are the various protocols the JMeter supports. But here we won't call as protocols, we used to call as samplers. Okay, all right. Next one, logical controllers. So when it comes into the logical controllers, where you can see the various logical controllers, if controller and transaction controller we already saw, and loop controller, while controller, critical, various controllers are there. So it depends upon the requirement. We used to use various controllers, but we are using transaction controller to define the transactions, correct? And preprocessor, so we have not used any preprocessors, but if you see, there are various preprocessors are there. One of the preprocessor called user parameters, where you can give, I can say you can parameterize your URLs using the user parameters. And post process, we already saw about the correlation concepts, where we can use the post processors like boundary extractor, regular expression extractor. And assertions, there are various assertions are there, various types of assertions are there. So response assertion, JSON assertion, size assertion, XPath assertion, comparison, duration assertion. So various. Duration means where we can see that the response time duration, and size is nothing but in terms of the response we received from the server, where you can see the bytes are equal to, less than or greater than or not equal to, like that. Various options are there in this size assertion, but most of the times we used to use the response assertion, where we can keep the text so to validate the request response, right? And next one is timers, so which we are going to learn now. Timers are nothing but here think time, So there are various timers are there: constant timer, uniform random timer, constant throughput timer, Gaussian random timer, Gaussian random timer, synchronizing timer, bean shell timer. But most of the times we used to use either constant timer or Gaussian random timer. Again, it depends upon the requirement. We may use different timers, but most of the times we used to use the constant timer. The constant timer is nothing but, I can say, fixed think time. In LR we used to have record think time. Sir, I'm sorry. In the load runner, replay recorded think time is there, right? So we can use the same here. So by selecting the constant timer. So I told you, when you are keeping any elements outside the request, so it is applicable for all, right? Even we discussed about the session also, right? Response session. If you are keeping response session outside the samples, it will verify in all the requests. Now, if you are keeping constant timer outside all the samples, then it will pick the time. It means it will wait the time between all the samplers. Okay, so whatever sampler you want to keep the think time, just copy that. So let me take this. So let me copy. Now, so between the transactions we have to keep, right? Now this is the launch URL, then click on enter. This is the request. Now right click on this request, paste it. Now you can see constant timer also inside the request. I can see inside the sample. Okay, all right. Next, similarly you can paste, and here also you can paste, and this request also you can paste here. Now here also let's expand. This one also you can paste here, and here also paste. If you expand, you can able to see inside the request. So paste. So expand, paste. So logout not required. Okay, so like this you can paste the constant timer. So by default constant timer, the by default delay is 300 milliseconds. So if you want, you can increase that. So just click on here. If you keep 3000 milliseconds, which means 3000 milliseconds into seconds, it will wait into 3. Whatever timer you want, you can just keep that inside the sample, not outside the sample. I can say sample is nothing but request. Inside the request, you can keep the constant timer. Okay. Here it happened 2 times. Let's delete one. Okay, so like this, you can place the constant timer. So thread delay in milliseconds are nothing but how much time it will wait between the two transactions. So that's called as the think time. Here in JMeter we used to call it as timers. You can use constant timer or random Gaussian timer also. Okay, now just go to view results tree. Now just clear and replay the script and you can able to see the delay. Now if you see, after launch viral it waited some time. Now if you see the confirm, I can see, okay, we given I guess 2 iterations. Okay, no problems. Okay, now it's successfully executed and you can see the order details. So thank you, your order has been submitted. Right, so like this you can place the timers. So timers here is nothing but the think time. Okay, so now let's go up and see the remaining elements. So right click and test fragment we won't use, and in config element, so we have used CSV dataset config file for parameterization and HTTP cookie manager to clear the cookies, HTTP cache manager to clear the cache, and we used, so those three elements we have used. And so there is another say I can say HTTP authorization manager. So this is also important. So why we have to use this HTTP authorization manager means, so sometimes when you are try to open the application, it gives a pop-up window to enter the credentials, I can say. So when you enter the username and password, it automatically launching the home page application. So in that situation, it won't capture the username and password. Okay, so when you replay your script, you will get the HTTP 401 unauthorization error. So where you have to pass the credentials by using HTTP authorization manager, where you can click on add and you can use your application URL here and username and password, and domain is not required, really backslash. So where you can pass the information, I can say authorization. Okay. Is Tarun Jain? All right. Okay, no problems. Tarun is not there. If Tarun joined, I can show him the script where the credentials will be available in authorization manager for his application. Okay, so this is also important. Authorization manager, sometimes we wish to pass the credentials, I can say the username and password in the authorization manager. So those kind of applications I can call single sign-on applications. So to handle the single sign-on applications, so we have to provide the credentials using the authorization manager. Okay, so this is also important, and let me disable for time being this one. And next we'll see about the next one is the listeners. We already added view results tree, right? So the view results tree is nothing but in load runner we can call it as output window where we can see the request status, right? Request status చూసాం కదా view results tree లో either pass or fail అనేది, and request response details also చూసాం కదా view results tree యాడ్ చేసి. And there are various listeners are there. So those listeners are mainly used for why it means on the analysis part. So where we used to add the various listeners before start of the test, and the results will be captured in various listeners. Summary report, aggregate graph, and hits per second graph. If you see active threads over time graph, there are various graphs are there. Okay, there are various graphs are there where you can add those graphs before start of the test execution, and once the test is completed you can see the results in those listeners. Okay, this we can discuss during the test execution. Okay, so like this, we can see all the elements. So just to go through the one by one elements. Okay, and once the scripting is completed, then we can start the test execution. Okay, so when comes into the our script part, so as of now we completed all the enhancements. So we did the placed the transactions, we did the correlation, we did the parameterization, we did the page validation, we given the timers also, right? And you may ask the question, so can we parameterize the URL, application URL? Yes, you can do the parameterization of URL. Say this is the URL, right? And the protocol HTTPS. So if you want, you can parameterize using the right click, add. You can use user parameters, or in the config element you can see the user defined variables. You can use user defined variables, or in the sampler you can see user parameters, both. So now here you can just add user defined variable, click on add. Now you can give the name is like so p underscore, I can say URL, and here value you can give the name. So what is the name we have? So this is the server name. Now copy this, now come here and paste this here. Then you can replace wherever the server name is there, you can replace with parameter name with dollar open closed flower braces of parameter name. So dollar open closed, I'm sorry, given that okay. So like this you can give the URL. Now let's see the next request. Next request also here is to paste this. So if you want to copy paste, then you can use find search. So go here, search, Control F, so search and replace. Now I'm replacing this with the search, I'm copying this, Control C, and paste this. Now you can search from here first onwards. Okay. So next, here, yes, you can replace. Next, yes, replace. Next. So like this you can replace. Next, replace. Next, replace. So if you are confident, you can do replace all. It replaces in all the places. Okay, so if you do replace all, it replaces in all the actions. Okay, now if you see here, so it replaced. Okay, let me start record. Okay, now so like this you can replace the URL in all the places. So if you want to, you can keep all this in the above. I can say first here. Okay, let me turn this, and you can paste here. Okay, yeah. Okay, no problems. Control X, can paste. That's okay, no problem. Anyhow, it's down only, right? It will work. There is no issue. Alright, so like this, you can parameterize the URL. So once parameterize that URL, as usual, you can perform the remaining steps. Okay, so like this, you can do the scripting of JMeter. I can say in this, you can do scripting in JMeter. Okay, so if you are unable to record directly through JMeter, then you can use the JMeter extension. Everyone knows, right? JMeter extension. So you can add the JMeter extension to Chrome browser, and you can record your application and convert that JMeter script into JMeter script, and you can download that, and you can open that JMeter script. I can say JMX file in JMeter, and you can start customization of your request. అది చూసాం కదా ఫస్ట్ ఇనిషియల్ గానే everyone. Yes, so like this, you can do the scripting in JMeter. Okay, so once scripting is completed, then we can start the test execution. So test execution, so the thread group will help you to start the test, I can say. So the thread group is nothing but it's kind of controller where you can define the number of threads and how much duration you want to run it, right? That we can define in the thread group. Now if you see the number of threads, currently it has 1. If you give the 5, so 5 users will run the test. And ramp up period, so ramp up is nothing but here it calculates. So the ramp up period divided by number of users, which means one user every 3 seconds it will ramp up. So 15 divided by 3 equal to 3 seconds, means every 3 seconds one user will do ramp up. And infinity, so if you want to run the test for specific duration, you have to give infinity and you have to define the duration, how much duration you want to run your test. Okay, you have to loop count, you have to keep it as infinity, and you have to enable specific thread lifetime, that's called as duration, how much duration you want to run it. Say for example, if I want to run the test for 5 minutes, so you have to convert into seconds. So if I give 300 seconds, where my test will run for 5 minutes. Okay, so let's run this test. And so before run the test, so let's add the listeners, required listeners for our test. Okay, okay, now right click, add the required listeners. Now so we already added view results tree. Now add the summary report, where you can see the results. I can say samples, average response time, minimum, max, standard deviation, error percentage, throughput of all these things. Now right click, add few more, aggregate report, and right click, add, just add the graph also, aggregate graph. Then you can right click, add the one more listener. I can say I'm just adding the hits per second graph. Okay, now when I click on start the test, my test will start executing and we can see the results details. Okay, so before that, what I'm going to do is, now just click on the transaction controller, select generate parent sample. What happens if you keep generate parent sample means it just displays only transactions, it won't show the requests. Okay, so you have to enable generate parent sample for each transaction controller. Okay, alright, now let's start the test. So let's see the summary report or aggregate report, where you can see the samplers. And let me add one more thing. So here, so if any error occurred, so generally in the load runner, if any transaction fails, it won't continue to execute remaining transactions, right? So here also, if any transaction got failed, I don't want to execute remaining transactions, then you can use start next thread loop. If you click on continue, if you are selecting continue, which means even though if second transaction fail, it executes the remaining transactions, but that is not actual the process. Okay, right, now let's click on start the test. Then you can see the transactions with status. If you see the transaction names with all the details, right? And if you see if you are getting any errors, you can able to see the error percentage. Okay, if you see in the top, all 5 users are running, 5 by 5 means all 5 users are ramped up. Okay, these labels are nothing but transactions, these samples are nothing but the passed count. How many transactions are passed? Okay, so let it run for 5 minutes. And if you see the aggregate graph, you can see the display graph. So where you can see the average transaction response graph of all transactions. And you can see the hits per second. So where you can see how many requests we are sending to the server per second. Okay, so like this, you can run the test. So let it run the test, let it finish it. Then we can see, I can say we can add few more scripts, I can say. Then we can run few more load tests. So let it run for 5 minutes. As of now, it completed 3.5 minutes. If you see that time duration in the right hand side, tap. Now once 5 minutes completed, users will move to ramp down state. Okay. Now if you see, all users are successfully ramped down 0/4. Okay. So like this, so you can run the test. Okay. So this is the sample one, I can say. So where you can see all the transaction response times and hits per second also graph. Okay, so we can save the results. Okay, so by click on save table data, that we can see a few more executions in tomorrow class. Okay, so please everyone just complete your script enhancement so that it will be easy for you to run the test. Okay guys, so just please explore. I can say please do the customization of your script, parameterization, correlation, page validation, you can say inserting timers, so that you can run your own test. Okay, so any doubt guys, or any questions?
సార్ ఎగ్జిక్యూషన్ స్టార్ట్ చేసాను సార్ నేను కూడా ఇప్పుడే 75 పెట్టాను సార్.
ఓకే, ఎనీ ఫెయిల్యూర్స్?
సార్ క్రియేట్ అకౌంట్ ఫెయిల్ అవుతాం సార్. అది
ఓకే,
2 users పెట్టి రన్ చేసాను సార్ ఫస్ట్. 4 users పెట్టి రన్ చేస్తేనే అది 2 minute అటెంప్ట్స్ అని వచ్చింది సార్. ఇంకా 75 పెట్టాను సార్ ఇప్పుడే. ఇంకా
ఫెయిల్యూర్ పర్సెంటేజ్ ఎంత ఉంది?
50% సార్.
దట్స్ ఓకే సార్, దట్స్ నాన్ ఇష్యూ. నిన్న మీటింగ్ లో డిస్కస్ చేసామా? అది
చెప్పాను సార్, చెప్పాను. అది అందరికీ ఉంది అన్నాడు సార్. ఆటోమేషన్ టీమ్ కూడా ఉందని చెప్పారు. మళ్ళీ ఒకసారి రన్ చేయి కాసేపు తర్వాత అని చెప్పారు సార్.
సబ్మిట్ అకౌంట్ సబ్మిట్ 0%. ఓకే ఫైన్, నో ప్రాబ్లం, దట్స్ నాన్ ఇష్యూ రైట్. నాన్ ఇష్యూ కాబట్టి యూ కెన్ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ అండ్ యూ కెన్ పబ్లిష్ ద రిపోర్ట్ పబ్లిష్ చేసేటప్పుడు యూ కెన్ క్లియర్లీ మెన్షన్ దట్ స్టేట్మెంట్. మనం ఆల్రెడీ నోట్ చేసి పంపించాం కదా.
అవును సార్.
సేమ్ థింగ్ యూ కెన్ మెన్షన్ దట్. అడిగవా డెవలప్మెంట్ టీమ్ మానిటర్ చేయాలి డ్యూరింగ్ ద టెస్ట్ ఎగ్జిక్యూషన్ అని?
సార్ గోపి మీటింగ్ నేను రాలేదు సార్, ఈ రోజు ఏమైనా వస్తున్నాను.
గోపి వచ్చినాక ఒకసారి క్లియర్ గా చెప్పు. సో దిస్ ఇష్యూ షుడ్ బి రిసాల్వ్డ్, అదర్వైజ్ we want to see much progress. We receive the same errors and chip. Okay guys, so let's catch up tomorrow and we can continue on the test execution. And